Hello, and welcome to Denver March Podcast. My name is Larissa Braid. I'm your host, and I'm also the powwow coordinator for Denver March Powwow. Before we get started, I would like to read our disclaimer. Those who are interviewed were raised, taught by family and tribal teachings. There are over 500 federally recognized tribes, and some teachings might be different from what you were taught, but that is the beauty of this project. Learning how powwows connect us all, but how our tribal differences make each and every one of us unique. Welcome to episode 2. Our first guest she's been with the Denver March Powwow for quite a long time actually. So would you please introduce yourself?
My name is Grace Gillette. I'm known among the Sucknish as Swahuch. I'm the youngest daughter of Shwidao and Sinishtaga of the Sucknish people who live on the Fort Berthold Reservation. I've been the executive director for the Denver March Powwow for the past 34 years.
Thank you. And also thank you for taking time out of your day to help record some of your history.
Okay.
So we are okay. So for our guests, we're going to have questions and then they're just going to answer or share their perspectives. And our first question is, how did Denver March Powwow start and why?
Okay. When I moved to Denver in 1972, there was a lot going on in the Denver Native American community. There were almost every night at the Indian Center, there was something going on. There were beading classes, there were singing classes, there were sewing classes, and just about anything you can imagine that surrounds the powwow community. And as I went down there, I found out it was all part of the youth enrichment program. And the program director at that time was Phyllis Culbertson, and she also worked in conjunction with the Denver Public Schools Indian Education Project. And what it was for the young urban Indians to know how to dance, how to sing, and how to dress for each specific category. And before the Denver March Powwow, the Youth Enrichment Powwow actually started, they would raise money throughout the school year by having fashion shows and doing dance performances, raising money so they could attend a big summer powwow on one of the reservations. But as a few years went by, the families decided that they wanted to have a powwow here in Denver so the community could see what these children, school kids, had done, that they do know how to dance, they do know how to sing. So it began as the Youth Enrichment Powwow at the Indian Center. And it was that for several years. And as it grew in stature, in Denver, we had 4 big powwows. We had the Denver Native Americans United Powwow in July. The White Buffalo Council put on a powwow on Thanksgiving and also during the summer months. And then we had the Youth Enrichment, which was in March. And March was chosen because it was scheduled so the students, teachers, and classmates could come watch them sing and dance. So that's why we have it in March. And when people would call, they would say, when's the powwow? And of course, as residents would say, well, which one? This would say the one in March. And so as time went by, it became the Denver March Powwow.
That's really cool. And I'm glad that we're able to do a powwow in the city just so that natives like me who grew up, we can also stay connected. Okay, how did you become involved with Denver March?
Okay, when I moved here, I came here on the Employment Assistance Program. And one of the first places I had an interview was at the ITAC, the Indian Technical Assistance Center at the Denver Federal Center in Lakewood. And when I walked in there, I ran into my brother, Frank Sherwood. And of course, we were, happy to see each other. And, he told me, you need to get involved. There's a lot of things that are going on. We need your help. He said, I'll let the brothers know that you're here. So from that point on, whenever there was anything at the Indian Center, I got a call from Frank, from Keith Fox, from John Fox, who I grew up calling my brothers. And they would ask me to bring down food for the event. sometimes, coffee or soft drinks. And at that time in 1972, buying bottled water was just unheard of, or bring a prize for the bingo. So that's how I got involved early on. And they had a drum group here, and it was mostly primarily singers from Fort Berthold. And so just from those early days, asking us to participate, that was in 1972. And then the next year, at the next Youth Enrichment Powwow, they asked my daughter, Avenel Jo Gillette, to be their head little girl dancer. And so that brought a lot of family from home. And the powwow has always had ties to Fort Berthold. When the powwows start growing, they invited Page Baker Sr. to be the MC, and he was that for many years. And our current MC is his grandson, Lawrence Baker.
And I think that's really interesting. When I started on this project, was learning how generational Denver March is. Even within our family, I'm the third generation, so that's really interesting. What changes have you seen throughout your years?
One of the changes is the location. We started out at it wasn't called the Denver Indian Center. It was called Denver Native Americans United. And it was in an old synagogue building down on 16th and Gaylord. And they had a huge ballroom. They had a kitchen space right off the ballroom, and they had a stage. And it was a huge facility that housed all of the Indian programs. And so we had it there for many years. And then we outgrew the space because that's when vendors kind of start becoming popular, and we had no space for them. And so they moved it to, before it was called the Auraria campus, I think it was called Metro. It was there in one of the gymnasiums for maybe 2 years. And the parking, there wasn't very good parking there. So it was moved to the National Western Stock Show, that it's called a horse arena. And actually, that's where we had our Denver November event. And it was in there for many years. And it just grew in popularity. And then one year, somebody scheduled the facility before us. I believe that was in 1989. No, in 1988. And so we went to the Coliseum, and we were just lost in there. It was so much bigger than the horse arena. And we went back to that smaller facility the next year, and we were too cramped in there. So we went back to the Coliseum in 1990, and we've been in there ever since then. And then the structure of the committee itself, first it was a loose committee. Then we had, they came up with officer positions. There was 2 co-chairs and a secretary and a treasurer, and then committee members. But as we got into our fundraising and as we grew, we got the attention, of the local tax departments, and we had to start, reporting our income in that. So they didn't recognize our positions, the co-chair and that. So we formalized the organization with a board of directors where we have a president, secretary, and a treasurer, and then with active board members. So that's another change we've seen. And like I said, the reporting, the larger the event became, the more reporting we had to do. It used to be we had to get a fire permit just to have the ground blessing so they could burn the wood and make coals to do the smudge. But now that, the fire department's been there over the years, they see it's not really a hazard, so we don't have to obtain that fire permit anymore. And just a lot of business aspects that go on that our participants know nothing about. Like, one of the bigger complaints is our fry bread line. Aramark has the concession contract for all of the city venues in Denver, and they allow us 1 food booth. And so the committee operates that. And we generally subcontract that out to different organizations for their fundraising purposes. But there's just no way around that line. We've tried several different things, and it's such that grease is so hot that it's really a danger when there's a lot of foot traffic. So we really can't open any other areas to sell it from. And then what we've tried to not change though is the admission. We've tried to keep the admission down and affordable for families, our visiting families that come. The parking, the food prices, we have no control over, and we do not get any of that profit. In fact, we have to give Aramark 25% of the proceeds for the fry bread stand. Did you want me to go into the changes in the dance styles and what we've seen in the arena?
Um, Maybe not yet, because I feel like that could be another 30
Okay.
minutes. But since you are talking about vendors, and I feel like we do get a lot of the same questions, and this year we did do a new thing. We decided to move our vendor process to online. Before we would have to mail out over 150 applications, and then they would mail in their applications filled out, and then we would mail out confirmation letters. And I feel like that's just kind of a lot of waste of paper, and it's a lot of time on our hands when we could be doing different things. But we moved it to email, and that was kind of a big transition for this year. But I would like for you to talk about the process for the vendors and the royalty.
Okay. The vendors, like I said, I've been doing this for 34 years.
Mhm.
And the vendors, they pay for the rent at the Coliseum, the basic rent, where we have to put down, I believe it's a $20,000 deposit. So the vendors, um, booth fees take care of that. But it wasn't always like this. There were many years when that Coliseum upstairs, there were a lot of empty spaces. But over the years, some of the vendors have been coming like 25 to 30 years, and they're not everyone is native, but they do sell a good product. And so in recent years, when we have gained popularity and people are after that vendor space, we receive criticism, that we should keep it open for new vendors. We shouldn't let, non-natives in there. But as a committee, we feel we have loyalty to them because they have been coming for so many years. So that's why, we give our returning vendors preference. And then later they get preference. We send out their applications early summer, and then we open it to the new vendors in August. And we usually don't have that many spaces available. Oh, and the princess process. The
Yeah,
princess
we get a
process,
lot of questions on that one
yeah.
too.
When we were at the Indian Center, when it started, it was by penny per vote. And whoever turned in the most money at the event won the title. And there were two categories. There was a junior princess and a senior princess. And that went on for quite a few years. And I believe it was I think it was in the late 80s, just before we moved to the Coliseum. On the committee, there was some interest in having a pageant. And so a princess committee was established, and there were volunteers. So they actually did a pageant for, I would say, at least 4 years. But I'm not exactly sure what transpired, but there was an issue during that last year. And that was about the same time that we switched over to a board of directors. And so we just discussed it, we got input from the community. And so what we decided on was, the board of directors is so active at and during and before the event that they would make the nominations, and they would vote and select whoever our princess would be. So that's how we're still doing it. And we've watched, if you can see some of these pictures in the background, most of our princesses have been coming here since they were juniors and even tiny tots. And the only time we have ever selected someone who came here for the first time was Simpson Heavy Runner. And she just made such an impression on, well, everybody on that dance floor. And so the committee, at times when they don't have anyone in mind, we ask our former royalty if they have a suggestion. And so this was in 2019, and we asked the royalty. And out of the 7 previous royalty we asked, only one didn't suggest Simpson, but all 6 suggested we offer the position to Simpson. And we did. And don't you know it? She's the only one, too, who had that title through COVID. And she was in school that whole time. So she had the title for like 2.5 years. And she was also the only one that wasn't able to come to actually give up her title. So we had called on one of our previous royalty, Rose, little Rosie Good Eagle. We asked her to put the crown, to crown our new princess. So Simpson's going to go down in the history books with our royalty.
Yes. And I feel like it's really important for those that are interested in being Miss Denver March to carry yourself in a good way as well. Something that, well, even when I was Miss Denver March in like 2010, there was a social media presence, but it's not as big as it is now. And I feel like that's also something to think about, is to watch what you post and what you say.
Your
That's
social
just my,
footprint says a
yes.
lot.
That's just my suggestions. Okay. And you also talked about Simpson being the first princess to have the title for 2 years. I also wanted you to kind of talk about what happened during the pandemic for us, because I feel like the pandemic hit, at the beginning of March, and we're kind of the only powwow that's a bigger powwow in March. And so it was very traumatizing in a way, just because, that's all we knew before then. So I'd like for you to kind of go over how.
Okay. Well, what we were traveling to powwows. We went to Weatherford, the governor's powwow in January. We went to the Seminole Fair in February. And then we start hearing things, that on the coast, East Coast and the West Coast, there was this virus that was coming in, and really didn't realize it until like the end of February when it starts coming in. And at this point, we had already spent, thousands of dollars on our advertising. So we were going to try to hang in there. But at the office and on, Facebook, social media, we were actually getting threats from, of course, they wouldn't leave their name, but we were getting threats from individuals calling us murderers. We were committing genocide against our elders because they always came. They wouldn't let anything stop them from coming to the Denver March powwow. But the week before the event is when WHO declared a pandemic. That was on a Tuesday, and Wednesday we called off the event, which was a good thing because on Friday, the Denver mayor closed all Denver venues. So they would have canceled us anyway. So we had a choice. At least we did it on our own. They didn't take that decision out of our hands. And it was a very difficult time. The first thing we did was call our vendors, ask them not to come because they had been canceled. And I think we caught all 158 of them, except one husband and wife team who came from Canada. And they always come early anyway because they have friends in Arvada. So we weren't able to get them. And then came the big question about refunds. And by that point, we had already, spent the money on, our pre-production costs. But, we had loyalty to the vendors, and then they had loyalty to us. So we called each one of them individually and told them we could not refund them, but we would carry them over to the next event. And there was all but, I think, two who really created some issues with us. They were, online trying to start a class action suit against us, but the majority of them are vendors. They just took our word for it, and whenever that came up, they declined to take any part of that. But strangely enough, those two vendors had only been coming for 2 years. So they hadn't established a relationship with us. And I think, well, all of us, the board, and like maybe the people don't know, but we announced Larissa's powwow coordinator position January 2020. And March 2020 would have been her first event. And had none of that happened, this would have been our 50th annual, but it's our 40th annual now. And I'm trying to transition myself out, but I couldn't just leave the organization high and dry. So I stayed on, and I don't know if other cities and states were as responsive to the nonprofit organizations, but I tell you what, Denver and Colorado really stepped up. Our largest grant is from SEFD, and it was like $42,000. And of course, first thing we thought of is, do we have to return this money? And, to our other sponsors. But before March was even over, the SCFD organization started having Zoom meetings. The Colorado Community Acts Fund, they start having Zoom meetings, and ended up that none of them required us to turn that money back in. They just asked us to report on it the best we could. And, thank God for that, because otherwise we wouldn't have made it. We were without the gate income for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And just thank God that we're, still able to continue on.
And I feel like because of the generosity of our sponsors and stuff, we were able to have Denver November once our city pretty much kind of opened up again and this and that.
That was fun.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you what, the vendors that were able to come, they want us to have it every year. But it's too close to March.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
it was
maybe when we get more staff, maybe that would be a possibility, but for just the two of us, it's just too much.
Yeah, it would be nice to try and do it again, but I feel like once we had Denver November going and people were there and we were in our first grand entry, I felt like it was like a sign of resilience. Like, we're still here, we made it through this pandemic, and not everybody could come and join us for that, and that's okay, due to different reasons. But for the ones that did come, it was a fun time. We had a good weekend, and it wasn't crowded enough to where you were like, oh no, or like, oh, I'm gonna get sick, or you had anxiety. But everyone had enough room, and I think it was nice for like the first pow out of the pandemic, instead of being like all closed in and like, oh, I can't breathe.
Yeah.
My next question is, what is your favorite memory you have from Denver March in all of your years?
There's so many. Year one.
34 memories. No, I'm kidding.
Oh gosh, that's really
Mhm.
a difficult one. We've been through so much together. I guess the most memorable is being offered the position of executive director for the March Powwow. In my entire career and, look into the future, I never ever thought I would be working for a powwow. When we did organize it with the board of directors, and only the board can vote. Well, I should take a step back. Before we switched to the board of directors, I was the first woman co-chair for the Denver March Powwow. And as part of that, I made it a point to have all the volunteers keep track of their volunteer hours. And when that was over, when the event was over, and I gathered all the comments, we had enough hours for 3.5 full-time staff people. Of course, not a budget, but that many hours, to put this event together. And so we talked about that. And so we talked about maybe hiring, executive director part-time or whatever. So all summer long, well, it took us about 18 months to come up with a job description. And so we worked on that. We got, pretty close. And then when it came time to approve it, we approved it. And then they asked me to leave the meeting. And so I was pouting, I left. And then when I came back in, they offered me the executive director position. And I was happy, but I was scared because it was the first time in my career I would be responsible for my own, raising money for my own salary. And I was working full time for the city of Littleton then, but prayed about it, thought about it. And so I accepted the position. And since that time, we've been very successful because I have a very supportive board of directors. And so, and with them is where the memories start. Getting the calls because, there's so much publicity for the Denver March Powwow. And early on, we chose not to put our individual names out there. So people who've been coming to the powwow for 25 years, they don't know who the committee members are. So, our name, we're putting our name out there, we're representatives of the Denver March Powwow. So then the recognitions start coming. When the Pope came to Denver, they called us. Can you have dancers there? When the G8 summit, all the world leaders came to Denver. I got a call from Harry Thomason one day. And he's the producer director for Designing Women. He said, "Miss Gillette?" I said, "Yes." He said, "This is Harry Thomason." I said, "Yeah, right." Laughed at him because that was one of my favorite programs. He said, "No, it really is." He said, I'm in charge of the entertainment for the G8 Summit on Saturday night, and we want you to provide dancers for that event. We also want you to be official greeters at the for the press earlier in the week." But just on and on. The Millennium, we were contacted by the BCC to be the time change for going from 1999 to 2000. And we had a powwow. They televised our powwow all over the world for the mountain time transition. And then, like 3 days out, they decided to bring in Neil Diamond because of all of his connections to Denver. He was having a concert at the Pepsi Center. So, and then the induction into the Library of Congress. We're one of Colorado's, I forget the exact title, but we're in the Library of Congress. We're in the Smithsonian National Museum for the American Indian. And then we were chosen as to be official delegates to go on the trade mission to the UK for Natives Go Global. So it's just on and on, just, and it's the board, call them and say, do you think we should do this? Go ahead. So, just with their support, we've been able to accomplish all of this. So So,
Yes. I do feel like, um, and this is just like from talking to friends that have come or don't know my connection with Denver March, but their thing is they think it's like ran by non-natives or something. And it's like
oh yeah,
all of our committee board members are enrolled in their respected tribes. So I feel like that's one thing that's maybe misinformation about Denver March that's out there.
yeah, there's a bunch of
Hmm.
misconceptions. Um, the non-native community think we're fully funded by casinos.
Yeah,
They think we're funded by the BIA.
you know.
And then the native side, they think we're funded by the city of Denver.
Hmm.
But we do we do all our own fundraising. And people think we're just rolling in the dough, but when all the bills are paid after the Coliseum, we're doing good to have our budget is over $300,000 for the organization. But to carry us through the summer months, sometimes we have $12,000 or $15,000.
Hmm.
And so, there's that's one of the biggest misconceptions.
And
And
the other thing that I feel like the people don't know is that we also offer tabulating services. So
mhm,
sometimes we're working in the summer. And I remember when I was in high school, there was one summer, I think we were on the road for like 6 weeks and it was
yeah,
just back to back tabulating. So we're not just a PAL, we also like kind of offer services like tabulating. And then right before the pandemic, we were doing pretty good. We were having a lot of what was it, conferences or not conferences?
yeah, we were on
Was it the
host
conference?
committees. Yeah, we were on local planning committees for
Mhm.
the national organizations that come to Denver.
Oh, and we were also having workshops too, but
Hmm.
since the pandemic, things have changed a little.
Hmm.
Well, before we end this, I'd like for you to talk about your special you're going to have at Denver March. And I feel like with this, we can kind of, or my other question would be, what are the changes you have seen in men's grass since it's one of your favorite categories?
Mm. Well, used to be when powwows, first started, um, you could look at a dancer and tell what tribe they were from by the designs on their beadwork and the
Mhm.
colors they wore, in their clothing. But competition dancing changed that, I think. And I don't know if anyone else has noticed, but who's ever the king of the hill for a few summers, winning all over the place. Before you know it, there's 3 or 4 dancers out there who have the same color clothes and the same beadwork
Mhm.
just to catch the judge's eye. But the grass dance for the Plains tribes, there's, like I said, we're all different tribes. There's many different origin legends in that. But a lot of the tribes on the plains were actually governed by grass dance societies. And we are Arikara. We're come from we're Wahoo from the Dead Grass Society. And I like the old style of grass dance. My nephew, near and dear to my heart, Milo Gillette Chase, he was one of the first little boys to dance on Fort Berthold. It was and at that time it was almost unheard of to see children in the arena. And I think that's why from that point on is when it kind of became a tradition that little ones need to have their right to buy their way into the arena from those societies because they're not adult. They haven't earned that right. So a family will sponsor them. And generally, um, other grass dancers, uh, military, veterans, or current military will bring them in the arena to dance. And he was one of the first little guys. And that's when competition dancing kind of first started. And adults, first place was $20.
What year was that, would you
This was
say?
probably, I would say, the early 60s.
Wow.
Yeah, because he was born in 1959.
And then only $20 for first
Yeah,
place.
for adults.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I've always had a special place in my heart for those little grass dancers. And as time, has gone on, they've changed. There's like anything, our culture doesn't remain static. It's changing, it's evolving, but that's how we survive. And I think as long as a grass dance, well, any dance style, as long as you know the traditional steps, as long as you know how to dance to specific songs, you're okay. And then intertribal contest dancing, dance your style, whatever that drum makes you feel, dance that. But I was fortunate enough to be nominated and selected for the 2023 Mayor's Award for Excellence in culture. And so because of that, to give back, I'm sponsoring a teen boys grass special and a men's grass special 40 and over. I was going to do it across the board, but Jen Archambault, one of our late Jen Archambault, one of our former board members, passed away a couple of years ago, and her family is sponsoring a memorial grass dance special for the junior boys. And then the Howell family just stepped up. They're adding $100 to each place for the junior boys grass in memory of their brother, Duke Howell, who's a U.S. MC Vietnam era veteran. And then Elias, his first time being head judge, he stepped up. And he's going to do a grass dance special Saturday supper break for grass dancers 18 and over. So I chose the teen boys and 40 and over, old style. And of course, I have my favorite dancers. So rather than, pick them and have them, be the contest winners, I asked Wyatt Baker, Sixie Cascabie and Wombi Claremont to be my judges and to run it however they want to. And I will be there and, to watch it, but basically they will be running it. And that's my way of giving back for this award I recently got.
That's really cool. And while we're talking about that, I'd like to mention mine. Eh? But me and my sister, back in 2022, we were chosen as background for Echo, and we kind of made it in the stickball scene, and then we made it in assembled for the powwow scene. And not only that, we've had some she just graduated with her bachelor's this past year, and we wanted to give back to the arena, so we decided to do a prize add-on for women's jingle and then women's northern traditional in honor of us. So, and that's when we add money to the prize money, because I know there's some confusion. Some years they'll be like, "Hey, they said there was a special on the flyer," and I'm like, "Oh, no, that was a prize add-on." So I just wanted to clarify that as well. So we have quite a few of those, but
And then just last night, I got a call.
oh yeah.
They want to remain anonymous, but in memory of her friend who passed away, she wants to add on basically double the prize money for the women's 70 and over. And I can't forget Poncho Brady.
Yeah. Another one.
I honored my nephews last year, and to give back, he's adding on money to the men's fancy. I think it's the junior men. It's 19 to 39 category.
Yeah.
And then youth enrichment is fancy. So
we're going to have a lot of women's and men's fancy, I think. But that's okay. Well, thank you, Grace, for joining us this evening. I think we had a very good episode too.
I enjoyed it.
Me too. And our next guests on the list right now are Ken Ledoux, and that's the president of Denver March. Lawrence Baker, he's the longest MC we've had at Denver March. And then TT Paskaman, our princess, she'll be joining us along with her sister Simone Paskaman. So we have some exciting episodes coming up, and yeah, I just want to say thank you for tuning in and listening, and don't forget to subscribe or hit the like button. But thank you again, Grace, for joining us and
You,
sharing some of your Denver March history.
you are welcome. See you in March.
Yeah, see everybody March 15th through the 17th at the Denver Coliseum.